Hey, good evening and welcome to another in the Total Transformation series. We're so glad that you could join us again this evening. And tonight we've got a very current and relevant topic that we are going to be presenting and hopefully answering any of your questions on tonight's subject. So this evening, we're going to focus on the impact of COVID-19 on education. And specifically, we're going to look at the potential opportunities that COVID-19 may have presented, but also there may be some potential setbacks to education. We all know our young people who've been facing examinations, the kind of turmoil that some of them have been through over the past year. So we're going to be grappling with some of these issues in tonight's series. And I'd like to introduce Beulah Plunkett, who will be leading our session this evening. She's an educationalist, and she has had many years of experience in the field of education. And she will be assisted by three of our young people who will also be making a contribution. And Beulah will be introducing them later on in the program. So I hope you'll give your undivided attention, and please invite, it's not too late to invite any family and friends if they've not tuned in as yet. If you do have any questions, we're asking that you place questions in the chat. So as we're going through the program, if anything's stirring in your mind that you feel that you'd like an answer to, please put your question in the chat and the team will pick that up and answer the question to the best of their ability. So that's enough from me now. So I'll hand over to Beulah.
Good evening, everyone. And thank you for joining us. I can see the numbers are increasing by the seconds. And it's a pleasure for us to come and talk with you and share with you our understanding of the impact of COVID-19 on education. I just want to share my screen, and then I want to introduce the small team that I'm going to be working with today, a wonderful group of people. And as you can see the names on the screen, we've got Trifina Rowe. She is a teacher, school teacher. It was very complimentary that they said that young people are going to contribute. She's a very able young people, and she's a school teacher, and she's going to give us a very informed perspective on what's happening with the schools. And we've got Sanaya Kandane, and she is on placement from studying at university, and she's going to give us a good bird's eye view of what that's like since COVID. And we also have Jacob Daniel, who is an intermediate student doing his master's, integrated master's student, and he's going to give us a student's perspective on the schools. Myself, Beulah Plunkett, I've lectured in colleges and I've lectured at the university as well. And I'm going to give you a faculty perspective and also a parent's perspective on the schools and nurseries as well, because that's part of the areas that I'm interested in. So I hope that we are able to answer some of your questions tonight. So each of us will be talking to the different areas as they come up. Now, the question that we're going to deal with is, what are the long-term impacts of COVID-19 on education in terms of opportunities and setbacks? That's where we're going to focus our mind as we go along. So we're going to look at, each of us will be speaking on one or two of these areas: nursery, early education, schools, colleges, universities, and placements. So I hope that we will be able to give you some valid information. So I'm going to start off with nursery education. And what we've got is, looking at child development, we know that in the early years of life, children need to grow physically, and they need to develop socially, emotionally, intellectually, culturally, and spiritually. And that's normally carried out in the home through the primary socialization process. And so when it is carried out in the home, you could say it is a better environment if it's a good home. And so because of the lockdown and all of that's happening with the nursery education, children are having to spend more time at home, and it's hopeful that being there with their parents, that they are benefiting from a more one-to-one support and development in their learning and growing, and that the nutrition and all that they need for their physical welfare will also be happening in a positive way. And that's the ideal, really, if parents were able to be at home with their children in those early years and really set them off to a very good start. That's what I would deem some of the opportunities out of this, that we really find that at home they get this hands-on, one-to-one support that they really need. Sadly, there are setbacks to the lockdown and children being at home. Children who miss out on having their growth and development needs met in the early years are likely to have a very difficult time catching up with their peers. I'm not saying they'll never catch up, but what I'm saying is they'll have a struggle there. And that might be because they're in a home where the parent might not be equipped to support them and help them to develop in the way that they need to. And so they could have issues with low self-esteem, lack of confidence, poor social interaction skills, which are so important, and even a loss of interest in learning, or not even really appreciating the importance of learning for themselves. And so that can really put them in a very difficult place initially. And the lockdown has created some of those problems, as we have heard, with children's communication skills being hampered by the fact that they're not out there in the nursery school engaging with each other and interacting with each other as they would normally have been. And so that is a great issue that we have to consider and think about. And then I just want to also touch on the fact that parents teaching children at home can create a problem due to COVID. The parents teaching the older children at home, this can be most rewarding. Studies have shown that children learn certain things better from their parent. They learn very well at school, there's nothing wrong with that, but from their parents. So the lockdown causing children to be at home, they get to experience some real situations, and they might learn to solve certain problems that they would not engage with outside of the home normally. And if the home has the equipment and the materials and the resources, then it can be very productive and very rewarding for the child and for the parent, because they can be working together and learning together as well. But of course, if you have a situation where parents are not equipped and it was a blessing for them to get their children into the school, into the nursery, then of course that parent will be struggling with helping their child, and that long-term effect is very severe. And it might be that the parent transfers some of their fears about education onto that child, and that has to be carefully monitored. The parents would also be under extra pressure to help their child to learn, and that might expose their own weaknesses. And that can cause a great deal of embarrassment for the parent to the child. So those setbacks can be far-reaching. So it is hoped that we can create and develop some support for parents so that they can, actually get to the place where they can help their children more effectively. So that's all I want to say on that part. And I'm going to hand over to Trifina now, and she's going to talk to you about schools.
Thank you so much. So good evening, everyone. My experience in schools, I am currently a high school teacher of science. I have been a high school teacher of science for 2 years, and both of those years have been impacted by COVID-19 and lockdowns. So what have been the opportunities, I guess, for students having education via media or digital platforms? It's provided this space where children, or my children, years 7 to 11, feel comfortable and confident It's an opportunity. We all often say they were born into a digital age. They like being online. They know how to use technology. So it's been a real opportunity, especially for engagement. Students who might not have been able to sit down in a classroom all day, might not have enjoyed that classroom environment, and being at home, being online and playing online games, online interactions has been good. Also that aspect of independent learning. So it's an opportunity for students to be in the comfort of their own homes, but also be a bit more responsible for their own learning, to be able to ask questions of the teachers, share things with parents and siblings who are at home, and also just get this sense of, this is what I need to do, how can I do it independently, without that direct one-to-one support from a teacher. So that's been good in terms of building independence and also resilience as well. You know, working at home, it was a massive change for all of our students. So just building that resilience, building that opportunity to come back from a setback, which might be, you know, the setback being that they're not in school, but providing that opportunity for them to be resilient has been really good. And also practical learning. I mean, I teach science, there's a couple of practical elements that we do, but being at home, you can be measuring things out at home using scales, you know, using maths. You can be learning about forces and gravity, you know, if they've fallen off a chair or when they're running upstairs, just different ways that you can relate what they're learning in a classroom to practical things outside of the classroom, so they can see the practical things of, you know, how is that plant that my mum has on the windowsill growing and things like that. So, you know, learning from home and the lockdowns have provided a really nice opportunity. But of course, there have been a couple of setbacks. So the setbacks include, firstly, there has been a decline in literacy skills, and this is one thing that teachers have been working on, and particularly with Key Stage 3, Key Stage 4, so the high school age or secondary school age. There's been a decline in the use of full sentences with students learning online. They've kind of reverted to text speak and shortened sentences that they've been putting in chat bars, etc., on Zoom and Teams. So there's been a decline in literacy skills, a decline in reading and spelling and orally saying words out loud. There's just been a decline in that area. And pupils have made less academic progress in comparison to other years. So in comparison to pre-COVID, like GCSE results, and we're seeing that students have been making less progress if they've been affected by COVID, mainly last year's cohort and this year's cohort. And finally, the attainment gap between advantaged and disadvantaged children seems to have grown. And that links to something that Aunt Beulah said about the opportunities that children have had at home. If they've had parents who have been able to spend time making sure that they are learning, then they have benefited. But if they have come from a disadvantaged background or home, that attainment gap has increased for those pupils. So just a couple of things to reassure you that it's not only setbacks. A couple of things that parents have wondered about is, well, how are my students getting grades, especially those in year 11? It's important to realise that this is a national event. It's not just your student or just your child who has experienced the lockdown. So governments and teachers have been working really hard to bridge the gaps between what they might have missed and to catch them up in terms of attainment. And just remember that the whole country is moving at the same time in terms of bridging these gaps. Teacher assessed grades are things that have been assigned to A-level and GCSE students, and they are basically, since students haven't had the opportunity to sit the exam, they are basically collating evidence from assessments throughout the year to give students the best possible grade that they deserve, putting in their hard work throughout their whole schooling career. And finally, schools and the government are offering home support. So in terms of if your student doesn't have access to a laptop, doesn't have access to resources, things like that, if you do get in contact with your school, they will be able to offer that support. So hopefully that's been a whistle-stop tour of what's been happening with high school students.
Thank you, Trafina. And so I'm going to talk a little bit now about colleges. And college students, of course, are fresh out of school and they need to learn how to study independently as well as to grow in maturity. And so the lockdown, which has meant that they have to almost study quite independently of their teachers even, you could say is an opportunity for them to develop in that area much more quickly. The teaching of most courses online have given college students more opportunities to develop the attitude of taking responsibility for themselves, which is an important part of growing up, that in this culture, we want to have independent learners who can handle their situation for themselves. So this experience of having to study from home online can produce those kind of really personal traits needed for higher education and for the workplace. So you could see those opportunities coming through for them, and also developing all those skills that Trifina was talking about for IT. Some of the setbacks could be that college students are moving from a school environment that is compulsory and very much structured. That's where they're coming from. They were guided and told where to go, what to do. Whereas at college, the student's timetable is made up of the subjects that they choose, first of all, so they have to take that stance, and then they have to organize themselves to go to their classes. Their classes are set up for them, they know the times, but they have to take that on board. And some students aren't ready for that, and especially if they actually don't have to go into college and they're studying online, to be motivated to actually get up and get organized and get in front of the screen and do the work might be a challenge for some students. COVID has put additional pressures on the students to attend online learning and to be responsible for keeping themselves on track because of the limited access to tutor support. So no tutors there to sort of encourage them to do their work, to stay on top of everything. They could fall behind. So first year students in particular might find this challenging, and that might, impede their progress. Not totally destroyed, but it can impede their progress. So it's something that we really have to keep an eye on. And it's hopeful that parents will notice what's happening and keep an eye on these things, and not, let their son or daughter just wander by the wayside. And then I'm going to now just talk a little bit about universities before I hand over to Snare, who's going to do the placements. The opportunities for university are really good in the terms of the COVID lockdown, students having to stay away, because university is about independent learning. You go there to read, you go there to research, and then you attend lectures. And you do this purely on your own decision about where the lectures are, when you want to go. You're not forced to sit in every single lecture. You are to choose and to organize yourself and go to them, but you have to make that decision. For some students, the online lectures will be welcomed because that can enhance learning, because what's going to happen is they'll never miss a lecture. Some universities are taking the opportunity to create blended courses that now include online as well as face-to-face lectures. And the Open University is an excellent university for that, because they started that. Years ago, I took my first degree with the Open University, and it was very difficult. And I think about 50 of us started and 10 of us completed, that kind of stats. And so I completed, praise the Lord, and I was happy to have been able to cope with that kind of learning. And I did like it myself. And it does facilitate that independent spirit to work for yourself, learn for yourself, and to get things done. So those are the opportunities that it will develop in some students. The setbacks, again, it's mainly the first years. When I worked at the university, I remember the first year students really being worried about how they were going to organize their lives to make sure that they did their studies properly and the reading properly and the research. And so lectures were places where they would meet fellow students, have a talk about how they're getting on, share their struggles and get support. And also they could see their tutors live and talk to them. Whereas the setback is they're not going to have all of that in place in their first year. And I know a few first year students who are struggling with that. And universities are complex as it is, and knowing fellow students is important, especially undergraduate students, because it's a whole new world. And there are so many things to do. And if you're on a really large campus, and if that campus is spread out over in different places, then you really have to get your head around the whole geography of your university campus, and then to understand how it works. And that is a good thing if you can do it and gain the skills and develop, but it can set you back, and therefore consequently might cause the dropout rate to increase. And that is something that we really have to carefully monitor in regards to universities. I will hand over now to Snare, who's going to talk to you about university placements.
So good evening, everyone. So currently I have finished my, so I'm going into my third year of university. So I'm currently on my placement. So I am a computer science student. So I'm working mainly in that industry. So we'll walk through some of the opportunities and setbacks of applying for placements at this time, but also like experiencing them and what value you get from them. So currently you have potential to work from home, which I think is a very great thing. It's very flexible. I personally am working from home and I've found it very enjoyable. It's great because obviously you're in the comfort of your own home. It's flexible because you can work based on the hours that are comfortable for you. Those kind of things are really great. And then also moving on, you have like more recruitment / positions possibly. So this is obviously varied from who you're working from. So if you're working with the NHS, for example, they tend to, have set places. But if you're working for like the company or different companies, that kind of thing, there are like more recruitment positions as working, remotely, there are more chances to have different positions, and especially as companies grow and develop. And then efficiency. So I personally found especially that when we are working from home and working remotely in placements, you kind of waste less time. So obviously you have more time that you gain from your commute, so you don't have that long commute, which is great, but then also you wasting less time with other little tasks which you might be doing in the workplace. And so I think working from home, and because of COVID and everything, it's a bit more efficient. Everything is online, so quite efficient. More visibility, as most things are online. So even finding a placement, so more about the recruitment side, it's easier to find these things because they're all online. You can have like a area or like set parts of, the websites and things, which shows all the information that's possible. And so going ahead, that would be really great for anyone who's applying for a placement because everything will be in one place and very organized. So, looking forward to the future, once things settle down and, restrictions loosen, hopefully we would be able to have a well-rounded experience as a placement student, and also an easier application process. However, obviously there are some setbacks that come with all of this regarding COVID. So one thing I've personally found as well is that you don't tend to get the full experience. Obviously, you don't have that in-person contact with people, so that can be a bit difficult. I know it's affected some people who I know are studying like medical subjects or like work in the hospital. Sometimes they can't meet their patients, so they have to call them. And also, even for me, it's difficult to work in a team because we're all have to have Zoom calls rather than meeting in person. So that can be a bit difficult sometimes. And so you don't get the full experience that you might want as a placement student to know how your course, like how that job would translate after you graduate. And then you also kind of lose the social aspects. Any workplace, you do have these social aspects. And so when you're working remotely and these kind of things, you don't you can't, talk to people, you can't get to make more connections and things because of the nature of the situation. And it's also harder to talk, and with social distancing, things are obviously restricted. Even if you do meet in person, things are restricted. So you do lose that social aspect. And some things due to COVID is that some students' placements were cancelled, and that's a really sad thing actually, is that it means that people who, who think they're going to do a placement next year are quickly rushed into just basically finishing off their degree in third year. And of course, that's what the route most people do take. However, it's kind of difficult for people who were contemplating on doing their placement to suddenly be told, no, you're going to finish your last year now, you have to do a dissertation, you have to do all of this. So it was quite harsh for some people who lost their placements because of COVID, because their companies or whatever could not facilitate that. However, this hopefully wouldn't be a mistake going ahead, because hopefully by this point people who are offering placements would have learned from this issue. And so yeah. And so it's as I said, even though there are like potentially more recruitment positions and things, and it's easier to find these placements, it's harder to sometimes get this information, because when you're in person, you actually have like careers fairs in universities, you have opportunities to connect and network with people in person, and it's just easier to get all these answers from the people directly, make your impressions kind of thing. But because of this, because of the online nature happening right now, it's much harder to get that information, and you'd have to go and do your own research to do that. And then lastly, it's much harder to get a placement. So this is one very consistent thing that I've seen across any course, is that it is much harder because your competition is higher. You have basically, especially if you're working remote, they don't have to choose people just in the local area. They can choose people further out because everything's remote. So you having way more people applying, way more competition, therefore less places that they can offer. And because of that, it becomes difficult to obviously get the placements. And so that's the last setback, because of the competition just purely being higher. But once hopefully going forward with everything, and once restrictions do lose, there is I feel like peer companies and also people who do facilitate placements do know what they're doing now, and hopefully they wouldn't make the same mistakes that they did whilst people were applying this time. And with restrictions losing, they will hopefully be able to get that full experience that placement years are meant to give their students. So yeah, I hope that gives everything.
Thank you. And we would now have Jacob. Is Jacob available to do?
Yes, I'm here. I'll just quickly.
I'll stop my share. Do you want to do your share?
Yes, please.
Let me just stop sharing. There you go.
Thank you. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, so I'm a first year medical student. Currently, I'm doing my integrated masters, and I'll just be talking about my experience in the COVID-19 situation. I have previously attended university during foundation programs where under normal circumstances, so I was able to somewhat compare the two. And here are the few opportunities and setbacks I found from COVID-19 as a university student. So for some subjects, the lecturers may go for a pre-recorded lecture. I found this in anatomy a lot of the time. This has its drawbacks, but also its opportunities. So the students are allowed to study at their own pace, although you may expect a university student to manage their time a lot better than a college student, it can sometimes lead to complications. So they may not study it at the correct time. So that could cause some difficulties further along the line. A lot of my lectures took place on Microsoft Teams. So it would be a lot of online teaching. And with the master's program, you have a lot of people with different backgrounds, and you have a lot of people with different responsibilities. So I know quite a few fathers and mothers in the program, and they've actually said how much they appreciate the program with an online format, as they don't have to spend a lot of time commuting away from their home, and this allows them to easily access the lectures. Another opportunity I found from the from COVID-19 that has opened is that lecturers have often tried to find different applications to help the online learning experience. So for anatomy, for example, that in the anatomy lab, you'd be looking at models. So they'd get physical models and allow the students to interact with this. But since the students can't do this, they found a resource called Anatomy TV, which allowed the students themselves to go online and to move around different parts of the body and be able to label them, which allowed the students themselves to access it in their own time. And another opportunity I found from COVID-19 as a university student is that it promotes independent learning. So I'll come back to this when it comes to the lecture materials, but sometimes the lecture materials may not be enough. So this will encourage the students to go out to the online library and stuff like that to fill in the gaps. And as a university student, I think these are skills that are really important. And COVID-19 has helped push, especially the year ones, into making these decisions or adjusting to this climate. And also, although the social aspect, which I'll discuss later, has been affected, the need for communication with the faculty, especially in certain subjects, has become very important, and your course members. So several WhatsApp groups have been opened in our course, and over the course of the year, whenever there's been a need to discuss with the lecturers, I found myself emailing my lecturer a lot more than I would have if I was in person or talking to them. So the connection was there. So whenever I needed to understand about a deadline, or didn't quite understand the lecture materials, I was able to network out and be able to talk to people about it, either via WhatsApp or via email. Now, of course, COVID-19 has put some setbacks on my life as a university student. So obviously the difficulty of learning on an online platform, some people learn better face-to-face, especially as my microbiology professor said that he really enjoys the interaction between students and teacher. And especially in an online classroom with about 200 people with their cameras off, this isn't exactly great. And also we have the issue with people who may not have as good of internet access as others. So either the computer is lagging or they are unable to access some things, which can really put some strain on their learning. I think when the lecture materials, we often have Blackboard, which allows the lecturers to upload material onto a site, so it allows the students to access it whenever they want. And some lecturers, they upload PowerPoints that are very detailed and that allow the student to go through it very well. And others usually try and keep it as a supplementary thing, so they have what they want, the main learning material, they want to come from themselves, and they want to use the PowerPoint or whatever they've uploaded as supplementary, which on face-to-face may be okay, but sometimes online, if a person can't access it, they'd rather have the full material there. So this has caused some issues, which we brought up as a course representative. I was able to bring up to the teachers and ask them to put the full information. And the connection that sometimes the university students have lost with the professors, clarity of what may be examined and what may not be, can really hurt the examinations. So we asked around November time, when we had a course rep meeting with our professors, we asked for them to color code the slides to tell us what may be examined and what may not be. Finally, I think the big thing, which obviously I don't think can be helped, is the social interaction, which I think has previously been mentioned. So this may lead to a lot of frustration as you get a university student who's sat in their room attending lectures for an extended period of time. And then after this, they have no release, which can lead to frustration and burnout over over an extended period of time. But overall, I think COVID-19 has posed some interesting questions to the life of a university student, and I think there's some benefits and some drawbacks that we've learned from this experience. And I think in the future we can use this to really benefit our future learning. And hopefully, when the restrictions are loosened, we're able to take these learning points and apply them. So now, thank you for your time. I'll give the time back to Mrs. Plunkett.
Thank you very much, Jacob. That was wonderful. All of us have really given some valid information, I hope. And so if there are any questions, I think I saw some questions coming through. We are happy to take questions at this time.
We have placed the questions on your chat.
Okay.
It has been sent to you directly, Sister Beulah.
Okay, there they are. Okay, shall I start from the top? Please place the questions on that. How likely are children to catch up on their learning? I think both Trifina and I can have a go at this one.
I'll start.
Go on then.
Yeah, so I was going to say they will catch up. There's a greater learning gap for kind of nursery and primary school age children, but for children or students in high school, it's more a case of content, and schools make sure that they have enough time to cover the content that they need throughout the year. So in terms of content, students will be able to catch up. In terms of primary school children catching up, it's more of like a social development thing with them catching up rather than a learning catch up. But just the point of everybody in the country has experienced the same gap. Schools across the country have missed the same period of time. So I wouldn't be worried about your students catching up in a sense. Yeah,
and I back that up what Trifina said, because children are quite resilient. The human mind is quite resilient, and the catching up, once the resources are around and they can access these things at another stage, they will get there. Because it seems like some people are even late learners, and people think that they're not going to get there, and they get there, and sometimes they pass the people who were ahead of them. So it's supporting them and providing the resources and being there for them that keeps that going, that momentum going. And if they can get that social contact and that loving support from their parents, they can catch up. And if the parent themselves keep themselves informed, I think that dovetails into how what can parents do to help support them. And parents get to know the teachers and get to know the curriculum and get to know the school. Make that something very important in your life, so that you know what's going on. When your child comes home and you have a conversation about school and teachers, that you actually know what they're talking about, because it's not all foreign to you, because you've popped down to the school, you've been there, you've introduced yourself to different people, and you kind of have an idea of who is who and what is what. Yes, it's a lot to do, but it's imperative that you make that happen, because your child can't do this alone at school. They need you supporting them. I don't know if Trifina wants to say any more about parents and teachers.
Yeah. Thank you. On the back of that, what can parents do to help support your students? Make sure they're prepared for school. The barriers that were there before, or the barrier that lockdown has presented, just means that we just need to be using our lesson time wisely. So make sure they've got pens, make sure they've got a pencil, make sure that they've got their books if they're carrying books from home. Just make sure they've got those little things, so that becomes less of a concern in the classroom for them. Make sure they're getting to sleep on time. Make sure if they've got their breakfast, just make sure all of those little things are there, so that when they actually get into school, they've got the best chance of learning in the lesson, the best chance of staying awake, the best chance of being able to engage. And then when they're at home, just being able to provide the best learning environment for them at home. So if they're doing homework, and you know there's 10 people on the phone, there's a football game, there's TV, there's so many things happening. Just if you're able to provide them with a half an hour of quiet time to just do what they need to do. Again, Aunt Beulah talks about, you know, not or when you're trying to teach your children at home, something that I said to my parents is, don't worry if you don't know the content, just ask your children questions. So if they've done something on, I don't know, I teach science, so something on photosynthesis, I don't know, just ask them, well, what did you learn today? Well, what does that word mean? So it's almost like you're giving them the power to teach you, rather than you being like, well, that's not right. I know this and I know that. If you do know it, then you can be like, well, I thought it was this. And then you can have a conversation. But I think a lot of parents get frustrated when they're trying to teach it and they don't know it. So I'd say ask your children questions, learn from them. And that should help support them in what they're learning at school. Hopefully that's
wonderful. We've got another one here. Is it how likely are the children to catch up on their learning? I think we sort of covered that in that they will catch up. And as Shafina said, if you work at making the environment that they have at home an environment that they can learn in and be comfortable in, and it's also how you speak to your children. You know, you give them praise, thank them, and encourage them, rather than always be telling them off or telling them that they're not going to be good enough. It's the worst thing is to tell a child that they're not as good as another sibling, when you think that will motivate them. In fact, it breaks their confidence and takes them in the opposite direction altogether. It's totally non-productive. It's best to tell them what they're good at. When they do something well, give them some praise and some love, and thank them for working hard at something. Sometimes children are doing something very important in their learning, but because they're young and the parent doesn't understand, they disturb them, disrupt the learning, and the child gets really upset and the parent doesn't know. But it was a big deal for them. You know, they were trying to get something done that was the equivalent to you probably writing a 5,000 word essay. They were trying to just write their name and color it in, and you pushed it all away because you thought it was not important. But don't look at your things as higher than what your child is doing. Always look at it within the context of the child and encourage them lovingly to get through. Let me see. Question: what can we as parents do to help support them? I think we've done that. How COVID impacted the emotional and social development of the child. If in your home you engage with your child emotionally, and if in your home you're able to, if you have more than one child, then they're able to play together and have that social contact. Sadly, social distancing is creating a problem not only for children but for adults too. So you've got to, I believe, do more in the home in terms of connecting with your child and talking with your child and engaging socially with your child. Put down the washing up and the whatever you've got to do and spend some time just having a conversation with your child and creating a relationship and talking with them and laughing with them and joking with them and having some fun with them. Just spend a half an hour and do something that will just help them to feel like they've engaged with another human being and somebody is there for them on their level, because that they're losing that by not going to school. So we at home, you've got to make up for it. So as a parent, look into those things and think, what can I do to help my child? What does my child need to be able to do more effectively by the time they get to this age? And how can I help them to do that? How can I literally, me, help them to do that? And where I can't, who can I get or what else can I get to help them to do that? because the social distancing has created some problems, and we've got to solve them. We've got to use our minds and think hard and find strategies, and then talk to other parents, ring them up, talk to them, find out what other people are doing. And you would get a lot of help from that there. I don't know if you have anything else to add about that. It's all about schools, Trafina. I don't know if you want to say anything else about that.
I think you covered that one. Just filling that social gap.
Yes,
and like the students are used to seeing their friends every day. They're used to having that rough and tumble in the playground. They're used to, okay, they might say, oh, I hate school, but they're used to that structure. So there is gonna have, or they will have had a little wobble. They've not had a lockdown before, the same way that we haven't had a lockdown. So we have to be patient with them. We have to know that they are missing their friends. They are missing that interaction. They are missing that bit where they might, have jokes with their friends that they wouldn't have with their parents. It's still inside, but they can't get it out because they've been at home all day. So just be understanding with them. And it's nice that they are back in school now, but things aren't completely normal just yet. So yeah, basically what you said.
Thank you. And we've got, what about physical health because of the lack of PE classes and the less physical movement? So you've got to go and take them to the park and have a run around the park with them, and take the football and go to the local park and play. Or if you've got a large enough garden, go out there and run around with them in the garden and jump up and down and make a fool of yourself, and play with your children, play with them, literal play. And not a board game, but a physical game, and just go out there and dance and sing and jump around. The neighbors might think you've lost the plot, but that's not a problem. But have some fun and some crazy fun with your kids until we are allowed to have, to have that connection with others again. You've got to just do it, really, and be a crazy parent. They'll love you for it. They will adore you for it if you give them that time. And you don't want to get old and sit in a rocking chair of regret and wish that you had done X, Y, and Z with your kids. Do them now while you've got the chance. And then I've got, how can parents help support the special children with learning disabilities during this time? I've got a little someone in my family with autism, so I've just signed up for an autism course that I'm going to get some understanding on so that I can help better. So you've got to just equip yourself with the information and ring people and ask them for information. And there's lots of short courses online now about different disabilities that you can get updated on. And like I said, it's a lot of work, but parenting is a job, and it's more than a full-time job. And whenever I do the workshops on parenting, and we look at the job description of a parent, everybody always falls off the chair because it's so vast. But they soon grow up, and then you've got to change your focus again. So the disability is not supposed to stop you from having a laugh and a good time and a wonderful time with your child, and finding out how they learn and what works for them better. Study some of the stuff, study it, read it, ask questions about it, and then try it. And even if you make mistakes, it's better to have tried than not to have done anything at all. I really hope that helps. I really do.
I would add to that as well. Like you said earlier, Aunt Beulah, being in contact with their teachers, because their teachers will know where they're at in terms of, how much progress you're expecting them to have and stuff like that. So if you're in contact with their teachers, even if it's just a one-off, just be like, what's their regular attention in a lesson, and what do they get through in a lesson? Do they write on the line or write off the line? These are conversations that I've had with parents from some of my kids who have special educational needs in my classes. So just parents just seeing what's their level, what am I expecting, and how do I best help them. So yeah, the teachers can help you out.
They can. This is a good question for us to get our heads around. what plans are in place for those students who cannot learn or focus via online teaching sessions?
Actually, I face this issue. If I'm not sure about the plans they have.
What
But
would you like to see?
sorry, pardon
What
me.
would you like to see them do?
Honestly, I haven't really thought about what they can do. I've primarily thought about what I can do to attack the situation. So a lot of the time in my lectures, it's a lot of heavy material. So I'm sat for 2 hours and I'm listening to the lecturer for an extended period of time, and sometimes my mind wanders and stuff like that, because I can't give my attention 100% of the time, or maybe I've not practiced it enough yet. The way I think of it is the probably encouraging, because I think sometimes students have the all or nothing mindset, where they either want to go all in or they do nothing. Maybe sometimes you would encourage them. You don't have to do everything. Maybe just attend it, listen, like like maybe get the main points, and that would help as well with the digesting of the information, and then attending, taking a break, and then revisiting the material and going over it in more detail. I think that's what's really helped me over the course of the year. And also they'll often give you breaks during the online class, making sure that you step out. You don't just go on your phone, you go outside maybe, or get some fresh air in between those times. These little tips I think would really help. And of course, what I mentioned before, sleep is really, really important. I've definitely found the days where I've gone to bed on time, I've been a lot better. So
Yes. And I think with lectures, when I'm giving lectures, I always use breakout rooms now, because I will turn one of my lectures into one element of my lecture into a big question and put people in breakout rooms, and they get to talk to each other. And that makes a big difference when they come back from those rooms. There's always this feeling of joy. We've had a conversation with people, and there was no social distancing necessary because we were all on Zoom. And they also get into the material so that the lecture becomes a bit more accessible to them, because they've done something with the material or beforehand, and it's helped them to grasp what the lecture is fully about. So this is really to the faculty that would have to happen and be put in place. But it's also that students could ask their tutors and make suggestions to their tutors for things that they would like to see happen, because sometimes the ideas are feasible, and when they are, then by all means we would take them on board. So every idea, is listened to and looked at to see how it could be applied to the reality of our circumstances. Okay, what about children who have a problem with attention? What do we do about children who have a problem with attention? Short chunks, very short chunks, with a mixture. If you're talking about a parent working at home with children who have short attention span, you've got to break everything up into even shorter pieces and make them varied, not the same, different things, because their minds need multiple different kind of things to focus on. They don't like to just focus on one thing for longer than 2 seconds, 2 minutes, a minute. And it's a lot of work, but yes. Were you going to say anything, Trofina?
I was going to say exactly what you said. I think most schools should be back in school now. So most schools should be delivering live lessons. I know a small portion of students, if they have to self-isolate, then they've been given the option of online learning for a short amount of time. But teachers should be delivering chunked lessons, small, short bursts of activity that build on from the next and the next to keep them engaged. So yeah, just what you said, everything's split up in smaller sections.
That's great. it says, do you think the gap of learning has been closed considering the syllabuses? I'm not sure.
I can have a go at what I think the question's saying. So essentially, I can speak from my subject. You know, we teach a GCSE course from year 9 to year 11. So Key Stage 4, we cover GCSE. And by the time our students get to year 11, by the time they get to Christmas term, they have covered everything on the syllabus. So we spend from January right to summer just revising content. So with our year 11s last year, although they had a bit of time outside of school, we still had like a backup 5 to 6 months that we could continue going over content with them. Again, this year, the government has talks about specific spotlight areas of the syllabus that should be covered and need to be covered. Therefore, there's not going to be a specific gap in knowledge because we've kind of highlighted the bits that are important for them to go forward. So essentially, hopefully this answers your question. When your student leaves high school, whether they're in year 7 and they've had, okay, year 8, 9, 10 and 11 to catch up on GCSE stuff, or whether they're in year 11 and they've just left, there shouldn't be any fundamental gaps in their knowledge. Even students that I've had who've had to isolate for longer periods of time due to illness, when they've come back in, we've gone back over the fundamentals with them. So hopefully praying your students have good teachers who will take that time to go over that stuff with them. But it's in the benefit of the student and the teacher to make sure that they have all of those fundamentals. And government schemes have said what those fundamentals are, so they won't be missed out.
Thank you.
Hopefully
that's brilliant. This one says, do you think the gap of learning between the rich and the poor and disadvantaged increased or decreased during this time? That the government has set out some feedback on that, and there is a gap, and it is increasing in some respects because there are homes with no access to the internet, hence no online learning is happening. And there are the homes who are fully flushed and everything is working perfectly. So those two sets of children, the gap is widening between their learning capabilities and possibilities. So yes, it is, but the government has said that they intend to do something about it. I think they're going to try and make internet access more accessible. And probably it would be nice if they gave all children a laptop. I don't know if that's how generous they're going to be, but something I think is in the air, because their greatest fear is to have a whole generation coming up and the majority of them are illiterate and not able to function effectively in the society that demands that kind of knowledge. So I don't know if Gideon or Snare want to say anything about that to bring them back into the conversations, because it has been all about school, but you might have some thoughts on that.
if they don't, I know I'm speaking a lot, but I'll come in just because.
No, okay, carry on.
Yeah, because the school I work in is classed as a disadvantaged school. We're in a disadvantaged area. So the gap has increased just because of the access that students do have. But if you are someone who doesn't have internet access in your home, or you're someone who doesn't have a laptop, as I said, you can get a laptop, but there's also printed packs as well. So you don't have to print those. Schools have been given allowances to print educational material for students who don't have access to the internet. So I think it's just about being transparent with your child's school, if you don't have access to certain things, for them to arrange it for you, because really that's our job. Our job is to educate your students. So yeah.
Amen. So it's there, and it's about people being brave enough to go to the school and actually say, I need this help, and hopefully getting that.
I'll just say if you maybe have one more question, if there's.
Okay. In a church that has so many people who work in education, is there more the church could do to support students now? If so, what? Okay. That's a tough one. It's just that if people have their full-time jobs, and schools, colleges, universities, we have our curriculums, we have our courses, we have things set out in a particular way in how we teach. So it's difficult to get to know that in a church you're going to have one of each subject area. You might end up that you've got a church where there's 4 mathematicians, but nobody else that teaches anything else. Do you see what I'm saying? So it's difficult to do anything but help people who need help with maths in that particular church. And you might have an ideal church where there's one of each: English, maths, science, you name it. And they can all come together and they're all willing, and they're all teaching the same type of students, and they can come together. So I think it's a complex thing to organize as a church, but I think it's something that the church members could organize and say, ask for people to volunteer to do this, and find out if they can set up a group who are willing to give their services to the church in that way. But it's not the easiest thing to organize. It's not impossible. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it's not easy. So it requires perseverance if you're going to organize that. And don't start it unless you intend to go through with it and stay with it and build it up.
Yeah, like could I add on to that? Like about what the church could do, I think not just using like the adults who like work in education, like one thing that like our church has done, which was quite good, was the older students teaching the younger students. So we had like the older students who had finished their GCSEs, or maybe just students at university, would teach the younger students who are maybe starting their GCSEs or, you know, going into the A-levels. And so because of, you know, I guess they feel a little less intimidated because, you know, they're seeing familiar faces, maybe people closer in age to them, they feel less intimidated. And so us older ones would just teach them the subjects that, you know, they wanted, like maths, science, English, whatever like our specialties were, and that seemed to work. But like Sister Beulah said, it does require commitment. It requires, you know, proper organization. But yeah, that seemed like a very useful thing that we implemented in our church.
Thank you. Thanks very much. So we've been told, sorry?
Can I just do 15 seconds as well? I'll make it quick. For the church's impact, not only educationally, but also the church is really good for social interactions. Just having that consistency, that social group is, if the church can engage their young people in just coming together, it doesn't even have to be on education, but just providing that network for them, that friend base for them is really, really useful.
Amen. Thank you very much. Thank you so much thank you, Shafina, thank you, Snare, and thank you, Gideon, for working with me on this. I've been very thrilled and informed about some of the new things, and I hope everyone that's been listening, I hope it's been helpful. Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to add my thanks to Sister Beulah, to Trifina, Sneha and Jacob for your contributions this evening. It's not an easy area. As you know, we can't predict what's going to happen in the future, and you know, we've been through this COVID period with all the challenges that it's presented in terms of education, right from nursery age right through to university. So you've given us there some kind of pertinent points and information there that hopefully has been useful to our viewers this evening. So my thanks to you all once again. Okay, we invite you all back again next week, because next week's session we're going to be focusing on the world of the online again, and we're going to be looking at opportunities and threats that are presented online. And our speaker next week will be Mark Palmer, who is a therapeutic social worker. We've had a couple of sessions already. The first session where we had the Greater Manchester Police, where they looked at how we could be lulled into contributing to scams, online scams. We've looked at online pornography and the threat that poses to many of our young people and also to adults as well. So Mark again will be looking at the opportunities and threats that we have online. So please again join us next Monday at 7 p.m. Again, we encourage you to invite any family members and any friends, for this is going to be a very, very interesting topic that we can think about and ask any questions on. So thank you once again for being with us tonight, and we'll see you all again at 7 o'clock next Monday. Good evening.